really appreciate here later on in the day. We're here to talk about RP-2, and really today we want to get into the details and talk about what neighborhood design looks like. We've had several meetings in the past, and so today is really kind of a chance to get into the details. I know not all of us agree, and we'll get into some more of the specifics of the agenda, but really trying to talk about what can we agree on, what can we not agree on. And I don't expect us to have it all solved tonight, but I sure want to make some progress tonight, and have kind of a real open dialogue and workshop. So real quickly, I'm going to go around the table and have everybody introduce themselves. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. Please just give me your name, who you're with, and who you're representing. Then I'm Jared Schneider with Kinley Horn Associates, working with the Planning Commission in County.
My name is Steve Luce. I represent and work for Eisenhower Property Group. I'm a major residential master plan developer in Hillsborough County.
Reed Fishbach with Fishbach Land Company. Work with a lot of agricultural landowners.
My name is Trevor Phillips. My family owns land right here and represent the Hillsborough County Cattlemen's Association president. Speak your name, I didn't hear it. Mayor McCullough.
My name is Jake Kramer with Sturridge Weaver. I'm the land use attorney. I represent several landowners in the RP-2 area, and also here as a representative of the Hillsborough County Farm Bureau on the board.
My name is Kim Corbett. I'm with the law firm of Ward Henderson. I'm a land use attorney as well and represent property owners, so mostly who have interest in the northern portion of the RP-2, but some who have holdings down in the fall.
Buddy Harwell, Ball resident since 2004 and board member of the Ball Civic Association.
My name is Maya Jane Banks. I am a landowner here in the Palm area. Been here since about 1967.
Hi, I'm Lisa. My husband Marie and I are and we've been here for about 22 years.
Her introduction covered me then. Yeah, I go along with her.
City developers since 1976.
Larry Singh with the Kinley Board.
Mike, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Mike Favreau, part of the Ball Civic Association.
Here we go around here.
Sure, good afternoon or good evening, everybody. My name is Jay Collins. I'm with the Planning Commission. Freya?
Hi, my name is Fiona. I'm with the Planning Commission too.
All right, I think we're going to have Mary Ann just say a word. We're not going to introduce everybody on the Zoom.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So I'm Mary Ann Abrahamson. I am with the Planning Commission. And we have a couple of folks joining us online as well. So when you all do your breakout sessions, we'll be having a conversation amongst ourselves on Zoom, and then we'll report out to the in-person group during the whole group discussion afterwards. So, so thank you for allowing us to be included in the discussion today, and we look forward to getting started.
All right. Thanks, Mary Ann. All right, again, appreciate everybody being here today. Looking forward to getting some discussion. So just to go over the agenda again, today we're focused really on the design. There's a lot of other things we could be talking about, like the infrastructure, offsite infrastructure, and we've gotten into that in the past. If there's anything that isn't on the agenda today, we're going to put that in the parking lot, come back to it again, just kind of focus on the design. There's a couple of things you should have had or picked up, and please let me know if you don't have them. First thing we're going to go through today is kind of some concepts that we developed, and this is really what we're calling beta tests. And we've got two different scenarios: the existing code today, and we came up with kind of a make-believe development, using today's code, what you could get. And then where we stand today on the code that's been proposed through that process that we went through last year. Understanding there's still a lot of comments and a lot of things to talk about, but we thought it would be better to have something actual to look at and would really spark some discussion. So we're going to go over that today. The second item that I want to point your attention to is you should have an 11 by 17 spreadsheet. And this came from our last meeting. We were talking here a few weeks ago. And we called it kind of your summary of topic areas and priorities. So we've got basically the bigger issues that we see, and we categorize them into lot types of development, open space and buffering, support infrastructure, community benefits, and we'll get into this in more detail, but what we put together is what we understand BCA's position is, the development community, and then the public in general, or landowners, what we've heard. And I thought that was just a good way to kind of see, obviously, we're not on the same page in a lot of things, right? So what can we agree on today? What can we absolutely not agree on today? So we're going to spend some time on this. And really, if you all see this and we're missing something or we misinterpret something, please let us know as well. But yeah, Mike, buddy, this came straight from, I think you also printed out what you all put together last year on kind of your farm residence concept. So just real quick to go through kind of the agenda, what we're going to do is we thought it would really spark discussion. We're going to split into smaller groups, and we're going to spend about 30 or 40 minutes on that and try to get a diverse set of different points there. And then we'll come back as a full group and really go through this spreadsheet as well as the concepts. And when we split into the different groups, we're going to talk about two things. We're going to really want to go through the concepts and have folks tell us what do they like about each concept. And sometimes you might have to try on that, but we're asking the questions of what do you like and what do you not like? And then also on the spreadsheet, we're going to have each group kind of go through the spreadsheet as well. So that's kind of a rundown of the agenda. Again, we'll do a small group for 40 minutes. We're going to come back here and talk as a full group and really go through it. And my goal today is kind of walking through, again, is there some middle ground, some concept that we can agree on, talk a little bit more about. Jay, I guess Clarence, Marianne, if you can hear us, anybody have anything to add to that? Set the stage here.
I think you said it right, and just from perspective is that I think some of you were part of the last workshop. I think really what came out of it was wanting to meet face to face really with communities, civic associations, developers, landowners, and really try to find a middle ground or find a solution, right? Because I think we've all been talking about this for a long time. And so part of it is that really trying to at least identify some areas where there is, I'll use the word compromise, so really so when oftentimes we talk about the big picture, I think there's an understanding of what each group is trying to accomplish. But then when we talk about specifics, and that's really the outcome of this effort, is really trying to identify those specifics that can be recommended, that can move forward, and that can be approved, really to accomplish what everybody's trying to achieve. Not everybody's going to be, 100% satisfied with the outcomes, but we're really trying to find areas of commonality and middle ground so that we can move forward. And I think one more thing I will say is that at our last meeting, we spoke a lot about some things that, to be honest, we don't have control over in this effort, such as infrastructure transportation. That is, that's outside the realm, if you wish, of this effort specifically on the land use side. So while that is important, while that has to be addressed, overall, that is not the focus of today's conversation. We're really trying to get to, as Jared mentioned, the issues that are really identified on this spreadsheet. So we're really trying to, again, drill in a little bit more, have those conversations, And again, I think we felt that in a smaller group, it'll allow for that conversation to happen. I'll, and I know you all be respectful, I'll say it anyways, that, it's a conversation. So you might have opposing ideas, but again, let's try to hash them out in a respectful manner, and then hopefully we'll get some resolution after, moving forward.
The only thing I would add to what Clarence said is that those conversations are memorialized. We do take those conversations about infrastructure back to other county departments. We are not silent on that because it is part of this process that other departments know that there are deficiencies, and those are some of the wants that the neighborhood, as well as property owners, as well as developers, are looking for in these areas. So make sure to put that out there.
Any
Can
questions?
I just ask you a question from a 40,000 foot elevation? We started this sort of process over a year ago, I don't know how long ago, at least a year ago. And you did your original analysis and worked with planning commission staff and came up with a series of recommendations. And packaged it up, and you went to a transmittal hearing where your professional opinion was to transmit the changes to RP-2 at that point in time. The board decided not to transmit, but did you take away from that a new set of direction from the board as to what to go back and take another look at?
I can answer some of that, and I'm sure Jared and Clarence might also want to talk a little bit about that. Steve, it's a very good question. Again, when the board wanted us to go back out into the community, at the community's request, due to COVID and other challenges that we were all going through, the idea there was to take the proposed draft and work that proposed draft so that we could be able to go ahead and have a larger and broader conversation with the community about what is proposed that we were taking to the board at that time. That was part of the conversation that we had with folks, was that they were unsure of the changes. They did not feel that they had proper insight into those proposed changes. So I believe that that is what we are trying to accomplish through this set of meetings, is having a very open and frank conversation about the proposed language as it stands now, and whether or not there will be any significant changes to that proposed language when we go back to transmittal again in August.
Based on feedback from that point, I guess it was January, February, and now it's May. Have you gotten a feel yet for what the community is looking for? What don't they like? What do they like about existing RP-2 regulations?
Yeah, I think that's a good part of what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, I feel like the BCA's laid it out pretty clearly at their point, so that's one of the things that's listed here, the spreadsheet as well. I think in February, we heard quite loudly from the landowners what they liked, what they didn't like. We talked about some very specifics about 40% open space they don't like, so that's really what we're trying to do today. This is I feel like our first chance to get together in a while to do this. So.
Okay. And again, not sure you all had a chance to look at the spreadsheet. A lot of those items are specifically spelled out in it. So for instance, I'm looking at the backwards now. Lot size incentives, there's the community sort of comments, then the development community's comments, and then, the landowners and others, and then, so they're all a little different. So that is part of what we're trying to talk through, is, again, tease out the, where there's middle ground.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I haven't seen the spreadsheet, but I think was RP-2, the idea, I think it's similar to WPR-2 to exchange the jobs requirement or the on-site retail for community benefits, sort of a menu
similar, but there's not the jobs requirements that
Okay.
there was in the past, the commercial requirement.
Right.
Community benefits were introduced last year.
And that was part of RP2 as well?
Yep.
Like, if you do 6 of the 10,
Then you
then
get into,
then you can get the bump up from 1 to 5 to 2 per acre.
Yeah, so we're not throwing everything out and what it's done, we're just trying to, head to that point of where when, again, from a transmittal perspective, it's something that can be, moved forward.
anybody else before we dive into it? I know there's gonna be questions throughout too. Yeah, Jake.
You had mentioned the test pits. Were you gonna talk about those now before we move into groups?
No, I thought we'd go ahead and do it in groups and go into it, and we'll come back as a group, obviously, as well. So I thought that would help us get some conversations started going. Anybody else?
Jared, it may be just, because I'm not sure if everybody's seen it, you don't have to go into all detail in it, but maybe it is good to just talk a little bit about the two concepts, existing and concept, see what the difference is so that people can. Does everybody have a copy of it?
Does everybody have a copy? All right. The test site one from the existing, that's showing kind of the existing code. There's so many different variants you can throw in here, right? So this is basically showing a 255-acre site. Both of them are, so page 2. And what we assumed here, you all know this, there aren't that many of these sites around, right? There's 2 or 3 of them in the whole area we're talking about. So we assumed you have 3 or 4 properties. This is nowhere in our area. It's a area outside of the bottom, but looks similar. So we took 255 acres and just maxed out the unit count, 511. So that gets you 2 dwelling units per acre. And then what we tried to do is show different lot sizes, assuming there's a half acre, a third, and a fourth. From what we're seeing out there, a lot of folks aren't doing the half acre instead of development. Y'all know that. And then we threw in the 250-foot buffer on 3 of the sides of the code today. So you'll see on the west, the north, and the east, there's the 250-foot buffer. And then we get the drives in the right of way. That takes up about 17% of the site. And then common parks, amenities, that's just, in your neighborhood areas, sidewalks, that type of thing, in addition to the right of way. That's about 12% of the site. And then we took just kind of an industry standard 15% retention. That's something that we've seen all over the place. It could be more, could be less in some different areas. And then we took basically just summed up what all these lots would take up of the site, and that's around 32%. And then we backed into what was left on the open space, 41%. And then we also included the village notes, since that's the requirement today. So we have to do 6,900 square feet. So I went through that pretty quickly. One thing I'll note, so we sent this to county staff to review too, like they were coming in, and Michelle Heinrich stated to me, the county staff, that we're not meeting the clustering ratio. So if you look at it, we did that kind of on purpose in a way, you wouldn't see the half acre lots. Those would probably, there's a lot of different ways to spin this, right? The half acre would probably go away.
I would tell you that we do this all the time, and roughly, as a general rule, to meet the clustering ratio, I've got to have 55-foot wide lots and small to meet the clustering ratio, which is a 5,000 square foot lot. Half acre lots and bigger 3rd-acre lots. I could not do that under the clustering ratio.
And that clustering ratio is 3.5 to 4. So that's what you have to do to get there. So that's one of the big things I think we need to talk about tonight. Does that change? Do we get rid of it? Fondle, we all talking about clustering, blanket. Ken, we talked about that.
Could you explain really detailed what is a cluster?
Yeah, sure. So that's basically where you get the lots a lot tighter in a smaller lot style. So you would reserve half of your land, let's say, for a simple example, put the same number of units into into the other half of the site.
So you're saying you put 3.5 to 4 in 1 acre? Is that what you're saying? And that instead of having 1 in an acre, 1.5 acre, you put 3.5 to 4.
Yeah, that's the requirement today based on the code.
And that would be in a half acre or a quarter of an acre?
One acre,
I'm sorry?
1 acre.
1 acre.
One for one, which you have as much open space as you have for the cluster.
Not today, the way it's built. No, not today.
And what Jerry and Steve are talking about are the current adopted regulations within these properties in the RP-2 realm. So that's how it's built today, just put it out there. That's not how what we're proposing, that's what it is today.
We're simply just trying to come up with what you could do or what you would do today.
What's the ratio to open land to cluster?
You can show some stuff down.
Yeah, perfect timing. So there's not a specific ratio or percentage, it's what's left basically is your open space today, the way that the comp plan and code reads. Y'all, everybody agree with that? That's what it states.
It's got to be laid out. I would think for us to even make decisions about that, we don't know what we're saying as well.
That's what's existing today. So under the regulations today, you are required, you have to demonstrate that, and Michelle, I might do this here with the development services staff, and also back me up and speak to this, but in order to achieve 2 units to the acre, you have to demonstrate that you can meet that clustering ratio and demonstrate that on the developable land that you can develop about 3.5 to 4 units to the acre. That's what's required under existing RP-2 now.
Required.
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 So that's where I was going with what we showed here. I couldn't do that because we need the requirements. So we had to take out the top of the watch button.
And the reason why they adopted a clustering ratio was to have a lot of open space on your project, and then you have smaller lots within your community to get to the density and the yield that you anticipate under RP-2. So there was some method to going along with a clustering ratio 25 years ago. 30 years ago.
The other thing is I think for the site plan, you don't have the majority of your lots like focused on a certain distance from them, but no, right? So you've got a lot of lots that are based on what your required code is. So
And what is that requirement? What's required to achieve? What do you get by putting 3 to 4 on the lot as quote required? And if you don't do it that way, what don't you get? So when you say it's required for what?
to achieve 2 units to the acre.
For the
To
whole,
achieve 2 units to the acre.
for the whole site.
Okay, so what if you only wanted to put 1.5 per acre on the site?
You couldn't do it. You have to be 1 to 5. So you don't meet the clustering requirements of the RP-2 that you can't develop 2 units to the acre.
So that's a county.
That's the
Requirement.
existing RP-2.
Yeah, I understand that, but I want to make sure I understand that if you bought 100 acres off of me, you would not have a choice to put less than 200 houses on it.
It wouldn't get,
You have 2 choices. You can either develop at 1 to 5 or to a maximum of 2 units.
And cluster.
And cluster.
And
So in
cluster.
order to get
So there's
anything
no-
above 1 to 5, so even if I was okay with 1 to 2.5, I can't do it. Doesn't allow you to.
Again, we're not understanding it. For you to achieve maximum amount of houses, that's what the requirement is?
Yeah, that's what's on the books
Okay,
today.
so it's required to reach the maximum amount of houses. It's not required to create the development. It's required to get the rights to put as many possible houses as you can in this space.
No,
That's what I want to know, what is, it's required for what?
okay, so let me sort of describe so as Tammy sort of described, if you have 100 acres, you could either do 1 to 5, which is 20, if I'm not correct, right? Otherwise, if you want to get beyond 20, then you have to cluster, and that's how you can get to the.
So up to 2 units to the acre.
Yeah, I understand that, but the whole point of the requirement is just so you can put more houses on
If you-
as the quote requirement.
So again, backing up history of RP2, these properties were zoned or were allowed for 2 units to the acre at the time the comprehensive plan was adopted. That was allowed. The Department of Community Affairs raised concerns. There was a court settlement that approved the RP2 concept. And that was, this whole clustering ratio, open space was all included. And Jake, please jump in correctly if I say something incorrectly. The whole area said, okay, if you want to achieve your 2 units to the acre that you had before the comprehensive plan, you have to adhere to this village concept. And so that's what the negotiated settlement for those property owners and those property owners' rights prior to the comp plan. And so this was a compromise. And so this has been on the books since
1989.
1999.
Yeah, we're aware of that. That's why we're having all these meetings, because of how screwed it is.
So,
But it won't be.
but that's the existing law. And so even if I wanted to do 1 unit to the acre, I would have to meet all of the RP2 requirements. So I would have to meet the clustering requirement to get 1 unit to the acre.
So if I had 100 acres and you're only gonna put 10 on there, it'd have to be 4 on 3 acres.
You
They would have to be clustered.
Mike, you can still do the 1 to 5, but anything above the 1 to 5, that's what we talk about clustering. So if you wanted to put on 100 acres, 50 homes, those 50 homes have to be clustered at 3.5 units to the acre. That's the issue. So it is a category that basically says an all or nothing. In that sense, it's 1 to 5 or 2. And at 1, it wants you to cluster still. So that's part of our conversation that you can have about saying, well, should clustering ratios be different for different thresholds that you might want to have? Should the clustering ratios go away? Should there be something else that's put in their place? All of these are things that we can break up into these groups and have that exact conversation. And I believe is what you're getting at, Mike.
That's what we've been doing for 3 years.
Yeah.
That's what we've been doing for 3 years.
Yes.
And it still doesn't seem to improve. That we're even moving
Let's keep
slightly
going. I want
in
to
that
explain the
direction.
next page.
Are we trying to rewrite RP2, or are we just want to push it aside and come up with a new plan?
I think we're trying to come up with the best RP2 we possibly can. It's tough to come up with a compromise, right? But that's what we're trying to do here.
I think the board direction was revise RP2, but I don't think that what you're suggesting in terms of does it have to stay RP2, I think that's part of the discussion.
So you're saying we could change RP2?
That's what we're talking about
Yes,
here.
you-
Yeah, let's see. So let me go to the next page and I'll show you what we spend time on. And I know there's been comments on that. So page 4, that shows the proposed code. This again, it's not adopted. That's where we last sat in February. So same site, 255 acres, same unit count. We try to get to the 2. So you have 2 dwelling units per acre. And then this is where we try to introduce different lot types. And this was going back to some of what DCA was saying. We wanted to show 1 acre, half-acre lots. So we showed some of those on the north. You'll see that on the periphery, those are larger lots. And then we have the 1/3 acre lots and the 1/4 acre lots. And a lot of what we're hearing, obviously, the 40-foot lot with small lots, nobody likes those in the community. So we try to put those interior to the sites that are hidden. And then they have to be served by alleys if you do them. And then what we did is we allowed kind of a sliding scale of the buffer. So instead of a 250-foot buffer, you could go down to 50 to 100 or 150. There's a range in there, but then you have to provide additional screening, the berms, the additional landscaping, and some illustrations are also shown on the next page. So the point we're trying to make is not 250 foot, but you and I can see, it depends on what you and I are talking about, but you can see thousands of feet. So if the point is to, and I don't think this is the only point, but it's the block development and doing screening. I know a lot of it's a larger lot, which has that rural feel. So that's where we allow the 1 acre, half-acre lot. And I think that's something that can be discussed tonight. Are there more incentives? Do you need more half-acre, 1 acre lots? Is this, diving into this one, as we started to apply more 1 acre, half-acre lots, we all knew that we couldn't fit them in. That's what any developer will look at, is how do I maximize my unit count? So what we ended up doing is reducing the half-acre, 1 acre lots. And then we reduced our buffers. And so this one's similar in that the drive's 12%, the right of way is 12% of the site, 15% for retention. The parcel area, I want to say, is larger because there's larger lots. And then we had that 40% open space. So the proposed code that we came up with, because if we're hearing about the open space, was we put 40% in there. So some have said that's too much, some have said that's too less, that's not enough. So that's what this includes, the 40%. You can see that's starting to get us into, that's more of interior to the site. And then we also put a neighborhood center that could have some of your amenities, like you could have the daycare, but there was no commercial requirement per se. You didn't have to do the commercial. There's just community benefits at that point that you had to meet. There's going to be trail connections. There's a range of these community benefits. So this is kind of, one particular example, and the county mentioned this to me as well. On the next page, on page 5, you'll see some more illustrations. The way the proposed code reads today is we have, again, the buffering and screening, that's on letter A. So you could do reduced buffers, but you have to do more screening. And then I want to point your direction to letter B and C, and this is where I was saying, like, we try to do as many 1 acre lots as possible, but the way we have the proposed code today is only out of that 30% open space requirement, only 10% of it can be covered by perimeter lots. So that's open for discussion too. Does that mean, do we increase that or incentivize that? That's something that we've heard from the community or not. It's a calculation. In the county reminding me on the right, we have conservation subdivision. So that's in the existing code today, but what we're saying is once you get away from a neighborhood center, if there's groupings of 10 or 20 homes, it has to be in 10 or 20 groupings and separated by green space. So I just went over a lot. That's kind of where we were with the proposed code. We heard a lot of comments in February about, space is too much. I think we talked about, we got into the wetland density discussion quite a bit. Some design standard questions. Any thoughts, questions on that?
I just think it's an observation. A lot of those zoning hearings that we go to, we're presenting our rezoning applications. A lot of photographs are taking at the zoning hearing master here and presented. That's you can see views from the roadway, and you can see maybe a couple of trees, but you can clearly see the smaller lots and the homes on the smaller lots from the roadway. So if that's a concern, then screening and landscaping materials, fencing or not fencing, but even more landscaping, like you have in that example A, would hide the use to a greater extent, because that's a very robust landscaping plan. And if you do something like that, the question I'll have of the group is, does it matter then at that point if the house, which you can't see, is 25 feet behind the landscaping materials, or 50 feet, or 100 feet? You can't see them anyway. So what difference does it make? So
Here's a very simple difference, not to interrupt you. But this bomb specifically, because apparently the rest of it didn't matter because it's all growing up everywhere. It doesn't matter. But bomb will sit here because this is a rearrangement of an urban design in a rural area. And that's been the fight right from the beginning, that turning this into the next Fish Hawk or Bloomingdale or Riverview or Gibson was not desired by the people that live here. So taking the same 5 or 11 houses and just restacking them, just take a box of dominoes and throw them on the floor and put them on that corner or this corner. We're still trying to appease an urban development in a rural area. That's, I don't care how big the tree is, I don't care how much it's covered, I really don't. I don't care if it's 250 feet away. We are trying to take urban into rural, and that's not the community out here.
Yeah, Mike, I know we put this together and I know we thought.
I mean, there's no wild
You're not gonna like it very much, so. Let's
It's
get
a
it
little
on.
different, it's just, you move the blocks around a little bit.
Talk about for the property owners, the property rights in town, just hear your perspective on that, that if somebody does have 100 acres here in the Long community, kind of.
Sure.
They're right now, since before the comp plan, they had density to do 2 units to the acre, so I think that's the balance that is happening here, is that you've got some landowners who had some expectations, investor-backed expectations in before the comp plan was amended and after the comp plan was amended. And a lot of what you're asking for is to take that away. So just want to hear your perspective, from the community member as to what you would say to landowners that might have interest.
Sure, it's the same perspective I have in the business that I own, because I'm a business owner, just like this gentleman is here. And I believe in fair profit.
Sorry.
I believe in fair profit.
Although that you understand that our ability to acquire money to do business come along, not easy to go with that.
Right, is that discussing turning into a development, was that discussing
I'm
continuing
not
business?
I'm just done, you're free to speak. Sorry, please. That goes along with the buffer zones dropping my land value by 40% overnight. How am I to continue from year to year? I have no plans to develop. I have no plans to develop. But that proposal essentially puts me out. I don't have the power to do business. And it hurts us because we're caught in the middle of a situation where I have to ask for our property values not to be dropped. But I don't want to develop the land. I don't have a plan to develop it either. That's the perspective that I'm having to look at it.
And since you and I are having a fair discussion, here's my perspective. I own a medical services business, and I pay technicians an additional 2 hours a day in the last year and a half, and have the same numbers you have to prove that because of how miserable it has gotten in the city of Tampa as in general. And now we're just looking to add it that much more out here. So where you're concerned, I have the same payroll concern because I service the same area. But I literally pay 2 extra hours a day, or I just work an extra 12 hours. So it's not a one-sided subject. And I'm not ignorant of that. But if I have 100 acres out here, I complain. If I have 100 acres out here or North Carolina or whatever, and I can make 3 million, or I can put 50 more houses and make 4.5 million, and it was a piece of property I got for $1 million 5 years ago, or what, I don't have heartburn that you're only making 3.5.
What if you owned it?
Excuse me?
What if you owned it?
Same thing I do with the business I have. I have a very good business, but I believe in making a fair profit. I can charge 30% more on my medical business all day long, and I'll give you my competitors things. I believe in being fair. I would sell it for your price.
Can you explain, you talked about the 250-foot buffer, and the 250-foot buffer already exists up to 70% of that. And the other thing we've heard online is about the wetland density thing, that costs you money. So I need somebody to explain to us, if you can't use the wetlands to farm, now your cattle can go on there and graze or whatever, that's different. But as far as I know, on a farmer, you're not allowed to till that and plant crops in there, correct? So how does that, how do you borrow money against land you can't use?
Using it, there's different ways you can using it as a loosely, very loose term. So using it, and sure, that's one way of using it. And you can't farm it, that's one way of using it. wetland can be used to help filtrate water that's coming off, running off of, let's just say it's a berry field. It has rainbirds, not a river system. Those fields are designed to run back into those wetlands filter that sediment out, so it's used.
Right, I understand that.
Moving forward for us, they just couldn't figure it out.
That's part of the use of which, that doesn't get brought up. That's one way they use that. And that's what's coming.
But as far as you can't, if that's taken away, you don't have no equity to pay more money.
I'd love to talk about this. I don't want to get too far off agenda. That's a very separate issue. What's interesting about Baum though, is there's very little wetlands. Very, very little wetlands in Baum. It's mainly high, dry, sandy, more a countywide issue.
Guys, I want to break us up here because this is.
But I will.
And I think we teed it up here pretty well. This is a good start to it, discussion. So I've tried to take, what I want to do is with the group we have, break it up into two. And I think I've tried to break it up into all the different kind of discussions that we have here. So but let's see how this works. I'm going to call it group one. I put Steve, Bree, group one, Cammy, and then Jean, group one, and Stan, and then Clarence, Mike Fabra skipped over, you were over there when we started. And then I thought group two could be Chris, Jake Kramer, Buddy, the Newsomes, and I think that's it. And so what I'm gonna do is have group two kind of go, we've got another room over here, and then group one stay here. And we're gonna just take probably about 30, 40 minutes to get into this a little bit more. Again, we gave you the highlights of the concept, so you can tell us what you don't like. Mike, I know you hate it, that's fine, but
That's not true. I just don't see it being.
I'm picking on you.
I don't see it being compromised. I just see it being switched around. That's all.
Let's see what we can kind of agree on.
I don't hate it.
Before we do break it up, I did also want to say, because of the wetlands conversation that we were having, the wetlands is outside the purview of what we're doing in the land use study, but obviously there is that publicly initiated amendment. On May 21st, from 1 to 3 p.m., there will be a virtual workshop, if you do not already know about it, that will include the Environmental Protection Commission and the Hillsborough County Property Appraiser, as well as our staff. So right now, you can go online to the website, Plan Hillsborough, and put in questions that you would like answered in that workshop related to things about valuation, or who delineates those wetlands, or anything else that deals with wetlands going forward as they relate today in Hillsborough County. So that is the 21st, it's virtual, 1 to 3 p.m. Thank you.
All right, well, yeah, thanks again for viewing us, guys. What time we have now? Does anybody have a hard stop too?
6 o'clock.
What's that?
6 o'clock, the first time.
Yeah. 6 p.m. Let's say 6 p.m.
Okay, hello, everybody on Zoom. I just muted the group there in person because they're going to be breaking out into breakout sessions now. So as a reminder, I'm Marianne Abrahamson. I'm with the Planning Commission. So while they're discussing the concepts and the topics matrix, we'll be doing essentially the same thing. And I know that it was a little challenging to hear sometimes the conversations that they were having in person. Unfortunately, I think that's as good as we can get with the audio there. So since it would be challenging to capture the live breakout conversations via Zoom, we'd like to try to attempt to hold a similar conversation online. So you're not required to participate in the discussion, but we'd love for you to participate if you can, if you want to. So I know there's not a huge group of us on here. We may not take the entire 30 minutes. I will say that after the 30 minutes is done, I heard they had a hard stop at 6. There will be a break after that to about a 10-minute break before they go back into kind of a report out to the whole group. So those who registered via Zoom as of noon today should have received an email with the meeting materials attached. If you did not receive that email, or if you registered after that time, the materials are also located in the chat. I dropped them in the chat box there. So feel free to download those for your reference, but when I speak about the concept plans and the topics matrix, I'll also have that on the screen for us to look at. So during the introduction, we just heard everyone on Zoom was muted so that we would not get feedback, but I'll go ahead and unmute you all or request that you unmute yourselves and just feel free to have an open conversation rather than having to raise your hand and have me call on you. So I'd like to be able to replicate kind of a small group discussion as much as possible, but you can also type your comments into the chat box or your questions into the chat box at any time. All right, so when the in-person, like I said, comes back from break, we'll listen to the report outs from them, and we'll also provide the in-person attendees with a summary of our conversation. So bear with me if I need to stop and take some notes some time. And I'll also take this opportunity to introduce Lisa Silva, who's also on our call. She is with the Hillsborough County MPO, the MPO, the kind of the other side of the Planning Commission. And while we will not be talking about specific transportation projects today, if any type of transportation related questions come up, she may attempt to answer those questions for you all. So before I bring up the concept plans, are there any questions at this time? Not hearing none, I will go ahead and I'll share my screen.
Marianne, is it 3 citizens that we have on the call? Because it appears everybody else is staff.
Yeah, no, so we have staff, well, Lionel staff, and then we also have Simon Bolin, county employee. So thank you, Simon, for being here as well. Gil Martinez with Enterprising Latinas, and not sure, Kelly Love, where if Kelly, and feel free, Kelly, to introduce yourself. If not, that's okay. Hi.
Hi, sorry, I was in my car driving, so I just got home.
That's totally fine. We're happy to have you here. So, and again, feel free to contribute as much as you'd like to the conversation. So let me just bring up, let's see, here we go. This is what I'm looking for.
So we have all staff except for Gil and Kelly.
Yes, and Gil, I know, is with Enterprising Latinas doing more work in Waimama. So
okay, okay.
Yeah, there was a large group registered, but you know, things happen. People aren't always able to.
Sure.
Make, so,
I just wanted to know who the audience was. And
yeah,
so I could,
and maybe more people will jump in because I know that sometimes, you know, people are getting off of work and sometimes make an earlier meeting. But let me go ahead and share this window for you all, and let me know if you can see this.
yep, seeing it. It's full screen pretty much.
Good. Okay, so
Get the title slide.
all right, so you can still see that. Okay, perfect. So so these concept plans, which I'll bring up in just a second, were drafted by the consultant, Kinley Horn, and you heard Jared talk about them a little bit, but again, it probably was a little challenging to hear, so I'll just kind of provide a brief overview of these again. So these concept plans were developed with the intent to show what could currently be allowed under existing RP-2 regulations, and then how the proposed policies could potentially modify what a site could look like. So these concepts take into consideration properties that are 160 acres or greater. And as a reminder, the proposed policy within the RP-2 lands within the Baum community plan boundary call for properties to be a minimum of 160 acres to be eligible for 2 dwelling units per acre. So properties can aggregate with an adjacent parcel to reach that 160 acres. But if they fall under 160 acres, then they would develop at 1 dwelling units per 5 acres. So that's in the properties within the bond community plan boundary that are designated RP2. There's also RP2 designated lands north of the bond community plan boundary. And when they are north, that acreage threshold, oh, sorry, Lisa, yes.
Are you advancing slides or talking to a map?
Oh,
Because we're still
no,
seeing the
not yet.
titles. Okay. Okay.
I just wanted to get some context first.
All
yeah.
right. All right. Just want to make sure it was.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. So, so then if you fall within RP2 to the north of Baum Community Plan boundary, the acreage threshold goes down to 50 acres. So anything 50 acres and above would be considered for 2 dwelling units per acre if you meet certain criteria. And anything under 50 acres would be 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres. Okay, so, all right, so here is the concept plan for what could be a potential development in the existing RP2 code. So here you see that there is a 250-foot buffer. This area relates then over here to this visual that shows that what this buffering, the setback could look like without screening, because no screening is required today. So as you can see that there's a setback from the street, but you can still see the homes and the rooftops because there's no requirements for vegetative plantings as the code stands today. And as Jared mentioned, let me kind of backtrack, sorry, 1 sec, is that this site acreage, they used a 255 acre site and are using the same site for both the existing and the proposed code, which we'll get to so that you can see how that changes. And they're hitting about 511 units on that site.
Okay. I have a quick question.
Yes.
The buffer requirements, is there anything that would prevent additional connections to the adjacent roadways? I mean, I see just one in and out, looks like access point for vehicular and pedestrian access. Is there anything
I
that
don't believe
prevents?
there's anything that would prevent additional connections,
Okay.
but right now, as the existing code stands, additional connections are not required outside of your emergency access and being able to connect to, obviously, to the primary.
Yeah, we just find that this kind of suburban design is not very desirable in other parts of the county. So I was wondering if the buffer requirements were causing that lack of connectivity.
I haven't heard that that's due to the buffer, but that's an interesting point. But I will say that in the proposed code, that is proposed to be modified, that additional connections, transportation connections are required. For example, if you are going to aggregate with a parcel next door to have one cohesive community, there has to be both pedestrian and vehicular access. And there's more focus on actually having that grid pattern.
Okay. So this existing code is prior to the improvements then?
Correct.
Revisions. Okay, great. Thanks.
Yep. And I will say that for the proposed code that they have done, it doesn't necessarily show a distinct grid pattern either, due to the layout of the site here. But there will be coming another sample of the existing and proposed after we get feedback on this.
You could easily punch through to those other roads. I don't see the names of them, but and cause, a hybrid grid.
Right. And the other thing too is that that with the proposed as well, you can see this right away here, dead ends here to this lot, which is, maybe has one home on it here and then another, here. But there would have to be stub outs that would be in place for future connections as well.
Right.
So But so going back to the existing code, so this is, again, this is a potential of what could be developed under the existing. So you have, again, that mix of lots. You have your half-acre lots in this yellow, the 1/3 acre lots in this orange here, and the quarter-acre lots or less in the red. I should note that the quarter-acre lots are all internal to the site. So when you're driving down the road, you wouldn't necessarily see those. So, and then of course you have your retention areas, your open space, and then you have your village node, which today requires an element of commercial development before you can reach 100% of your entitlements to build on your site. And then as they had also spoken about in the whole group meeting, there's a clustering requirement today as well. And that is 3.5 to 4 dwelling units per net acre is a clustering requirement to achieve your 2 dwelling units per acre. And that I believe the intent behind that was to preserve open space. And then of course here you have just kind of visuals about what those different lots may look like, and then what your village node may look like. So are there any questions right now before I move on to the proposed? No? Okay. Okay, so here is the proposed code. So right off the bat, it may not look entirely different, but there are some distinct differences here. So as you can see, and as Jared had mentioned as well, we are proposing now a range in regards to the buffer. So instead of a 250-foot flat buffer, it could be as small or as, I guess, as wide as 50 feet. And then it goes from 50, 100, 150, and then onwards. And there's an element of screening that is now required. So depending on what your buffer is, your screening would then depend on your buffering. So the smaller buffer, the more screening is required. So the larger buffer, the less screening is required. So you can see that here in this A visual, that this is an example of very dense screening. That's probably around 100% opacity here, so that you cannot see the development that sits directly behind it. There is a note that, this is not necessarily what the plantings would look like when they first come in, and that this example is at full maturity of the plantings. So we don't want to, of course, overpromise that this is what every development will look like and you'll be able to see anything. Over time, of course, that will change. And like I said, it depends also on how wide your buffer is. So then we also have in this example 1 acre lots around the perimeter of the site, partially around the perimeter of the site. And that's something that we've heard oftentimes, from the community, that half-acre lots and 1 acre lots is something that they would like to prioritize. So something that we're also trying to get out of the conversation today, one of the things is some feedback on the concept of open space versus lot size. What is prioritized if you were to choose larger lot sizes over more open space, or less open space, I should say. What would that be? Is there a perfect formula between those two things? Again, here you have the larger lots around the perimeter. So you have the 1 acre lots and half-acre lots around the perimeter of the site. And then you have the 1/3 acre lots and quarter-acre lots internal. And in addition, for the quarter-acre lots, you have alleyway access, which is visualized here with C. So folks, in order to access their driveway, would have to go down an alleyway rather than the main road in the subdivision. You'd have, of course, sidewalks leading up to your front door, but the garage access would be via an alley. And you would not be able to provide the half-acre lots if you don't have that alleyway access. So another thing that,
I I have an observation question. So is the open space amenity publicly available to all of the housing types, or is it just like open space, certain conservation areas in the lots that adjacent?
That should be available to everyone. If it's considered an amenity, should be available to everyone who lives there. Of course, that will be dependent on the site in regards to access. You know, if everyone has equal access to that. In this instance, this retention area looks like wetlands. So, you know, so there would maybe be like, if they get approval to put a like a walkway over, you know, the wetland area, that might be a possibility, and turn that into an amenity space, or have like access maybe through this corner or something. You know, that would have to be determined, I think, per case by case basis.
Right. I guess.
Can I?
Sure.
This is Kelly. I know in the current regulations, you're not allowed to count stormwater ponds towards your open space. And I think y'all were changing that if you had some type of a trail or amenity or passive recreation around it. And I think that's a great idea, because I think one of the big issues that when we do plans like this and say, oh, look, retention is going to be in the wetland, I don't think you can do that, is the issue of sites that do have wetlands dispersed, and then the ponds have to be dispersed, or if they're in the floodplain area. It really, I mean, your basic drainage stuff usually dictates first and foremost where all this stuff can go. So the more flexibility you can have to promote, you know, a nice view of the wetlands, and usually you would have ponds between the wetlands, and you should really be able to count all of that towards your open space. Otherwise, it just becomes a futile exercise of kind of like whack-a-mole. You're going to be like, oh, I need to get 3 types of housings. Oh, and then I need to do this. And then it's just, you're trying to do the math. So it becomes kind of a futile effort to try and get to that density of 2 units an acre sometimes, especially with that clustering. I know that some of the stuff we're doing in-house right now is if they decide to make a little bit larger lots, all of a sudden the clustering ratio changes because you don't have as many units, and it kind of defeats the purpose. So I'm all for being able to count open space that truly is open space if you make it an amenity. And I do believe you have to have it open for your whole community. I mean, that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right. And right, so we're not proposing the clustering ratio anymore. That's not going to be a requirement. The open space, you're right, the retention areas are now being allowed to count towards your open space. And, you know, lots of places are putting walking trails, as you said, you know, around the retention ponds, and turning that into a community amenity as well, rather than just a place for the water to collect. So, and then the other thing that we're modifying, or proposing, I should say, to modify is the concept of the village node, which we're now calling a neighborhood center. So as I mentioned before, there is a commercial requirement, and in order to achieve 100% of your entitlements, you have to build out this commercial requirement. But now we're taking a little bit of a different approach and calling it a neighborhood center, and opening up those uses to not only commercial uses, but things that we believe would service the neighborhood. So things like daycares, churches, schools, farmers markets, various recreational uses as we just, you know, spoke about as well. So we're kind of broadening the definition of what that is. And so those would then be located and required within your neighborhood center.
Is there any kind of requirement about percentage of open space and the distance to the housing? Because I'm looking at your like concentration of the smaller units, and I get this was just a illustrative example of like how much can we get in the old and how much can we get in the new, and you just slap it on here to kind of maximize it and stuff. But seems like maybe these would be a little more desirable if there were some built-in design requirements that, like, you had, you know, if you had a like urban park open space mailboxes, nice amenities, part of C, then those smaller lots might not be so undesirable in the rural area. A little bit like your example here in the lower right corner, it's more organic
Right.
and the green space is in and around and touching most of the lots instead of just dead center in the perimeter.
Right.
I don't
Yeah,
know
no,
if
that's
you have any of
good
those
point. And so
requirements.
the conservation subdivision is a concept that's that is available, but apparently, in speaking with county staff, it's not often used. So we're trying to kind of create as much as we can of that through these
Okay.
policies. And so there is an open space requirement of 40%. However,
Yeah.
one thing that it's right now, it needs to be contiguous, which is also a thing that we, are not sure, if that's the best way to go right now. So because that kind of, as you had mentioned, kind of centers it all into one area, it doesn't necessarily, create that conservation subdivision look if it's all contiguous and it's not able to be kind of interspersed throughout. And so that 40%, so in the existing, there is no open space minimum requirement. It's essentially what's left over after clustering and all of your other elements are accounted for. But now we are recommending 40%. Again, this is subject to change, but 40% open space. And so as I mentioned kind of earlier on, one of the things that we're hoping to get some clarification on and feedback on and kind of a temperature check on, how would everyone feel about increasing the lot sizes, decreasing the open space to maintain that rural feel, especially along the perimeter, if that's the concern that you drive by, you don't want to see kind of row house style development when you're in the rural area. So all of those things are what we are still trying to kind of juggle. So any feedback would be great on that. But yes, and then the other thing is that there is a distance requirement that a certain number of units needs to be within walking distance, a certain walking distance from the neighborhood center. So maybe in this example, moving, the neighborhood center like in this corner or something, closer to the smaller lots maybe.
It even seems like in the definition of neighborhood center that you have some of those higher quality open space uses. So yeah, they were, within distance. And I live in a traditional neighborhood development where you have the walking distance. And I need a big front yard because I have the pocket parks and quality open space mixed in. And I know that the county does have their traditional neighborhood development code. There might be some language in there that would get you a superior design. Because again, not just driving past these places, but the experience within them, I think the community would embrace some more if they weren't just this row of, alley stuck on top of each other, tiny lots without any quality open space mixed in.
Right, of course.
I think the market too, when I looked at this plan originally, I was like, I know very few developers or feel there's going to be a market for someone wanting a half-acre lot. That's usually a very different type of, and then being up against T&D, which is more of an urban form. I think you can do some
right now. It's just all gridded off alley,
right
small lots,
and
without any amenities nestled in.
But the requirement now on the to get the points to get to the 2 units per acre, you need to do the smaller lots all be T&D, and I think that's probably a very aggressive approach. I think there's a lot of 40-foot lot products that you can make without having it to be T&D. I don't think you're going to mix those two. I just don't think people are going to say, "Oh, I'm going to buy a big expensive, 1 acre lot," and be. That's just not the way.
I would assert this is not T&D right now. It's just suburban conventional laid out, all lots of.
Yeah, but those are alley loaded products, the smaller lots.
The alley doesn't define T&D. So that's just a small lot.
Right. So I don't think it should have to be alley loaded because I think you can do. I don't know. I don't know many developers who be like, oh, okay, let me. I think we're going to have an issue getting to the density and the market when you have to do the way you guys have partition the size lots. If the ones that I saw had to be all rear loaded, there's an awful lot of rear loaded product. I mean, that's a different, I think,
Well, I don't.
community product. I
Yeah.
don't know. To
I
go
wonder
with
if you-
half acre and acre lots around it. I don't know.
I wonder if they had to get the 40%. Looks like they kind of had to squish them all in there to get 40%.
Yeah, it shows that it was, and this doesn't even have wetlands. So when I looked at the to get to your credits of how many things you had to do, I was like, I think a lot of people would be hard pressed being able to even get to 2 DU per acre.
Well, that's the maximum.
Because of those mixes.
You're allowed to go up to 2. It's not guaranteed to.
I know.
Right now, you're guaranteed 1 to 5.
I mean,
1 to 5. To get the extra, you got to do some hoops. So.
Well,
But we got to get to the right.
A lot of hoops being asked. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, because you're in the rural area. So there's
So
to
are
get
you referring,
we got to get to the right
for-
balance of hoops.
Yeah, are you referring to the community benefits list? That in
Mhm.
order
And
to get the.
yeah, I like that idea. But I think probably we need to do a few more samples to see if you can even get to it with it. I'm assuming did these samples get to it to 2 units per acre with their checklist, the community benefits list?
So, yes, so
Mhm.
if I'm doing my math correct, 255.5 acres, and they got 511 units.
Yeah, it says right
So that-
underneath there 2 dwelling units per acre.
Yeah.
Right, but they
that's-
they got all their checklist. Like, what did they use for all their checklists to get to their, you know, how you get 0.5 for something, 0.75? I'm assuming they did, otherwise I doubt they would have brought it forward.
Right.
But it's
and
probably
that's,
because of the T&D or
that's
the
a great
alley loaded
question.
product.
Yeah, I need to go back to, I need to ask the consultant that question for the next kind of revision of this. This is kind of the first time we're bringing this forward. So I agree that would be really helpful for everyone to be able to see, okay, for this specific development, you know, we checked this box for the community or for the community benefits. And so this, you know, this is the product, that we derive.
I mean, I think a lot of the development community like that flexibility to have a laundry list of items. I think it, you know, we just need to see how it works. And
The scripture, the little caption, Marianne, says that it's got 40% open space, 3 lot types, the sliding scale for buffering and open space, and no commercial.
Yeah, those are just basic requirements. So those are not the community benefit requirements. Yeah.
yeah, you have to get like 4 lot types, I think, to get points.
Right.
And that's going to be tough. I mean, because you've got 1 acre lots with half acre lots and sometimes the market, the people just don't want to purchase. You know what I mean? It's hard enough when when they have a 50-foot lot next to a 40-foot lot, and they're like, oh, I don't want a 40-foot, you know. So it may be
And,
difficult to sell the large lots against with some really small product. But then you need it to get to the density if people want to pay the money and the landowners want the money because they, you know, expect the 2 units per acre yield. So it's
right.
a tough one.
And some of the conversation too goes back to, you know, how tightly do we stick to the village concept? Because RP2 was initially meant to be a self-sustaining village. Essentially, every development would be self-sustaining. That's why the commercial was required. You know, but in order to have that, you need the rooftops to sustain the commercial. They can't all be 1 acre lots. And if they're 1/4 acre lots, that's really not a rural feel, you know. So what is that balance, and how much do we kind of stay true to that village concept when we're looking at redoing these?
Right, because so many of these are much smaller parcels now. I think the original intent was like 1,000-acre villages, thousands, you know, was going to originally come forward and be able to have that type of density toward the middle, and then it spread out. And even looking at this, I'm laughing because like the density, you know, like you look at the old picture in the comp plan and there's a little square right in the middle, and this is like almost the opposite of it. It kind of has the open space in the middle and then density and then lots. It's a hard one. Unfortunately, we're not working with like just a huge swath of land anymore. A lot of it's been broken up, and there are a lot of smaller lots that have made it tough to kind of assemble, I think.
Maybe we just
But
need to
I really
get
do
some
like the
lighting.
idea of the point system, or trying to, you know, give some flexibility with that. It's just a matter of kind of figuring out what the best ones are. So.
So looking at this, I know we have about 5 minutes left. So that went by really fast. And we didn't even get to the matrix, the topic area matrix. But that's okay. I think we've gotten some good conversation here. But looking at the proposed code, because Kelly, you're a development community, correct?
Correct.
So looking at this from that perspective, and I know you've already brought forth some of those thoughts already, but if you were to look at this and say, okay, yes, this seems to be doable, this seems not to be doable, or from a market perspective, you know, this is what the community we typically see, you know, people go for these types of neighborhoods or not, or these types of design elements or not. Is there anything you think missing from this, or anything that you think could be improved upon?
Well, I
And I don't
think
wanna put you
particularly
on
in
the
these
spot
rural
either.
areas, you know, I think we really want to, I don't have the checklist in front of me or whatever, but was there like something for a trail system and internal circulation and things like that? I think that's really helpful out in these areas. People want to have that type of experience really in any subdivision now, but particularly if it's supposed to be, you know, kind of a rural themed. The only thing I'm unsure about is still this issue of, I know you're saying no commercial requirement, but the daycare, church, or school, do they have to build it, or do they just have to set the land aside for it? Because sometimes you just, you know, some of these internal smaller sites, it's very hard to support if you don't have like a daycare on the main road that people see it, or, you know what I mean? It's for some of that type of
Right.
those uses, but
So
like,
the
does it
neighborhood
count?
center, it doesn't need to be now internal to the site. It can be on the main road. So
Mhm.
that I think would be helpful, as you mentioned, you know, getting more kind of business and being more visual to
Small.
attract
I agree.
that support. So, but yes, there is a certain component that is required to be built, and not just have land set aside for it. Now, one of the community benefits does talk about land dedication. Actually, a couple of them talk about land dedication for offsite commercial, for example, or on additional on-site commercial. But the actual building, if I'm not, you know, completely misspeaking here, but if I believe the actual neighborhood center structures do have to be developed.
Yeah, it looks like they're pretty
Yeah.
flexible. It says a park, a government or public service. So if you had a civic building or something, public or private pool, school, community garden, farmer's market, church, daycare, indoor rec center, or neighborhood.
So
break.
can the amenity center count toward for the community, or it has to be an additional type of building that's open to the outside community?
So amenity center, like a pool and like a rec center type of thing?
Clubhouse, yeah, like the HOA clubhouse or something.
No, you know, actually,
That's a good question. It does
I
says
don't think
indoor
that
rec.
counts. I don't think that counts towards the neighborhood center, but let me confirm that. Don't take my word for it, because that's one, need a double check on that.
Yes.
Because I mean, the issue of like, and I don't know how, you know, how the current code says, oh, you can only build X percentage of your lots until you have like the commercial or whatever. I think that was just the big issue of kind of what stymied a lot of these, that, you know, they don't have the units out there to build an internal type of, or a big church, and a church, or, you know, that some of that stuff takes pretty big acreage too. And so you're just going to have to keep doing the math about how is it worth it to them to put that land aside. I get it. And that was the whole point of that, is those aggregated villages, to be able to kind of combine some of these. And so, you know, someone would have the there could be 2 or 3 of these size ones adjacent to each other. I just don't know the land area, how many of that's possible anymore. And you guys have probably already done that analysis, of like what's really available out there for some of these new
We
village
do have-
developments.
Yeah, we do have our parcel analysis maps, and I think the full group is getting back together in a sec. I just got a message about it from Jay.
All right. Well, thank
but-
you.
I know we could talk, but I mean, this is really good. I don't mean to cut anybody
No,
off.
no,
but
no.
I
It's my anniversary. My husband's waiting for me to go have dinner, so I just wanted to get on.
Oh,
So, and I know those. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And I know those folks in there are representing the crew, and they've been involved longer. So thank you for allowing me to participate. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, I can send you the parcel analysis maps as well.
Okay.
Separately.
I'm sure those guys have, I'm sure Steve Luce has just gone over it all completely. All right.
Sure
Thank you.
All right. Thank
All
you.
right.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye. All right.
Bye. All right, so let me stop sharing this for you. And then it looks like they are getting ready.
Since there are only small parcels left and they're so not workable, seems what's logical is that it just reverts back to AR.
Oh, okay, let's see. This will join back in 5 minutes. Okay, so 6:05. Oh, so we don't get a long break. Let me stop talking so you guys can get a few minute break, and then we'll come back and listen to the report out. Okay. All right.
Space in the community versus, I feel like this is kind of artificially created. It's good for community inside, but no one outside is getting a lot of benefit from it. And they're usually always stuck in the back of the property because it's the most expensive to develop the back of the property. So it's like, oh, put all our open space in the back. No one sees that, so in the open space concept was really WCR2 concept. Was a different compromise. So
Let me
go ahead.
if you don't mind, because I don't run out of time, is that if I have an open space requirement, say 40%, I would like the flexibility to put that open space where it seems best appropriate. It could be wrapped into the middle of the site, or the edge of the site, and it could be connected together with like an amenity center and trails, but to require a 200-foot perimeter buffer as a big component of that open space, I think that's not perhaps the best layout that I can come up with. If I can replace the 250-foot buffer with screening materials, with landscaping that's more robust, and I can screen off my development from the adjacent roadways, and then put my open space in various other locations, I think that's a win.
Well, let me tell you what we think, okay? Because I'll use that property right there, because we were completely and entirely idiots when we first got started this for 3 years, so we just lost miserably. And that one there got PD rezoned over there. And what it says is that there will be a berm and a 6-foot fence. But the house is allowed to be 35 feet tall. But we'll reduce it from 250 to 50 feet if you'll put that berm and that fence there. And I don't know about you, but to me, that's somewhere in the area of 15 to 18 feet of a house as I drive around Palm, as opposed to what I see now. And at 250 feet, that would not be the case. And if we want to figure out how to compromise that, then we figure out how to compromise that. But to say it's going to be with berms and stuff like that, the house I have down here, they put in the T-Bell Electric, Stacy White, and I get along great with the man. They are going to fix it because in the front of your house is going to be nothing but a solar panel. And they fix it with a 6-foot chain link fence after they cut the trees down over the fences.
Yeah.
All right, listen, during the screening, it's going to have to be very well defined.
let's talk a minute. I mean, okay, open space. We got to somehow get this conversation focused on solving one of my item at a time.
All right.
So, open space. All right. My concept, at least a thought.
All right.
Open space. We have requirements for a certain percentage of a development to have open space in that development. Okay, as a community, what we want, what we really want is we want to maintain or retain a little bit of the agricultural lifestyle that we have in our community. So I think as a community, and I don't know, Bob, Mike, I don't know if we've really talked about this or not, but an example of something to consider would be you increase the size of the lots. If I'm a developer and I increase the size of the lots from 40-foot lots to half-acre lot, that's what we want. That's what we really want, is half-acre lots. Then the developer gets some credit for, it would allow them to reduce a certain amount. They still have to have open space, but it gives them a credit to reduce the amount of that open space. And potentially, if they would go half-acre or larger lots, then potentially, why can't, as a community, we say, all right, if you'll put in, 2/3 acre or 3/4 acre lot, larger lots, something that's more accommodating to the area, then we're okay with potentially reducing that buffer from 250 feet to, to 150, or, so there's some, those kind of concessions or those kind of thoughts that allow you to compromise and come up with a reasonable plan that meets everybody's needs. So,
You're talking about a sliding scale, depending on the exterior lot.
and I haven't done a specific calculation or the math, but I'm saying those are the kind of options and incentives that I think we should be talking about to allow us to retain the basic agricultural. If somebody's got a half-acre lot, at least they can build a little garden in the backyard or whatever and have something, they can do some agriculture or whatever. But if you increase the size above that, there should be some form of incentive to allow the developer to get something back. It says, okay, I made bigger lots, it fits the neighborhood, the people are happy, and what I get as a benefit is some form of incentive.
But doesn't that depend on really what price range of your homes that you're trying to sell?
Yeah, the economics really come into play. It becomes a very expensive lot, and so you're only appealing to a very narrow segment of the home buying community. I mean, if I came to you and came up with some other ideas, I had to position the open space around the community, and that is 40% of the project, and put it in places where it makes sense. But it's not necessarily attributed to larger lots. Bigger park. We've got linear corridors. And maybe looking force it up. There's ways to get out of the space. Possible.
And that's what we wanted to have this discussion about, is we would like to understand what those options are and see what best benefits the developer and the community, so that we can retain some of our lifestyle.
How do you know?
That's what
You
it
gotta
is.
let it go.
You gotta let it go,
So, you mind?
In regards to your notes are mine.
Well, either one, I mean, he's over here. Put it up. You get your need, and then I mean, where you sort of, but I have this conversation.
Go on and see what you have.
It's really start getting used to it, like, halfway down. So here are using statistics of one.
finish off Riverview in fall.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, what is, like, bigger commercial, staggered, I mean, I thought you could grow. I know. But, yeah, I mean, they, but in reality, if the neighbor doesn't want that happening close to, it's gonna go to the opposite. In a lot of ways, rather have that than the. But the roads run a different story, that's where that makes it. But they have one problem. And I'm working really on that. And it's- I make all the next one. Yeah.
Of listening to.
Yeah.
All right, guys, thanks for humor us. How's it going? All right, so thanks for humor us and having this breakout session, but that just helps us to get more conversation going. So I want to hear kind of from both groups, but I want to hear this kind of the purpose. I want to go through the spreadsheet too. So, you know, the topics that we came up with, I'd like to try to focus on. So I think what we'll do is have group one, I don't know who's going to talk about that. You guys want to do it?
If group two was more disciplined than we were and going on the checklist, it might be beneficial.
Sorry, group two, I was gonna see what group one did on that. That's fine, why don't we just go through the conversation that occurred, and then we can kind of come back to the spreadsheet too.
Yeah, so maybe I'll start giving sort of the context of the table one conversation, and then, you know, I've asked that maybe we can sort of talk through some of the bullet points, and obviously you guys want to, if you have anything specific you want to add. And we had a very spirited conversation, and I believe that it was required because it kind of got us to the same page. I would say, we had to kind of really sort of describe, you know, what we felt really strongly about that was working or wasn't working and wanted to happen in this area. And I think once we did that, it allowed us to start getting into some more of the, you know, the specifics of everything. And so, I mean, I think that one of the things that was important as part of the conversation was that recognizing there is a big concern about what has happened in the past, the deficiencies in investments in infrastructure and whatnot. And I think that what was very clear was, as a group, recognizing that we can't fix what happened in the past, but moving forward, it's important to identify how we can target investment in the infrastructure in this area and be able to allow that to move forward. So that, I'll sort of stop there, because that's kind of where we got to in terms of this, where, you know, that currently the policy in the rural service area, there isn't under the CIP, the capital improvement plan, identifying those improvements. So really, I think everybody's asking for improvements in the infrastructure. And so one of the things that was discussed was identify mechanisms so that we can target that. So that's a bigger policy question, but I think that was clearly, you know, described. And we thought that led into a little bit of impact fees and that sort of identifying mechanisms. So to that, maybe I want to for the next, which is really, we started getting into the checklist and, you know, now the time. I think we have about it.
We had a couple things that we thought we might be able to talk on. I'll say that in my bit. One thing we talked about was commercial areas and within the neighborhoods requiring commercial. And it's something I've been thinking about a while. Brought up a suggestion of instead of putting the neighborhoods, actually selecting an area within Bond that will be a commercial zone, and we'll give it a commercial land use, so that small businesses have opportunity now to go put a chamber up or build a small office, instead of waiting on the developments to do it. And you can kind of identify the properties that you want to have a commercial office. So when the businesses, people do want to come to town, they have to go to a specific area. Thought that might be something better than within the neighborhoods. Traditionally hasn't worked well. Even the community biggest fish off. I mean, their town center struggles with their master. People there, that's they're in and out, constantly trying to make it.
Great, sorry, Scott, did you guys talk about kind of where that could be, or?
We did not, you know, but we just talked about, hey, that might be something to look at, where it could be at.
It would need to be out on the collector, I'm sure the roadway.
Yeah. We talked about, like, we brought up the lighting, definitely would, you know, would love to work on an initiative on how that would be written for the dark sky initiative. You know, I kind of brought an example of the Tico lights that we get, we have to pick 1, 2, 3, which one do you want? And maybe working with them, saying what's the best option for the dark sky initiative, and saying, hey, these are the lights we're going to use. I would say 90, probably 90, maybe % get all their lights to Tico. They install them for you, you pay them. So we can talk about that a little bit, but we all agree that that'd be a good initiative to try to work towards. The open space, we were having some good discussions here when the time ran. I would say, I can't say that there was consensus on this.
Let's try to see actually.
Well, I can't say that there was a consensus, but we talked about being able to redesign open space to fit properties better, be more efficient. Had a little bit of conversation about screening. We had a conversation about larger lots on the perimeter, being more an incentive to put more larger lots on the perimeter by reducing buffers. Just all around, we're having a discussion on where the open space should be and in what ways to give incentives to meet what the community wants to see on the exterior of the community. So additional thoughts, but they're mine,
Appreciate it. All right, I'll go through 2 real fast, and guys, jump in here too, and add on to the public commentary. I think overall, one of the things I'd say we did come up with an agreement on was allowing a mixture of lot types. What does that mean? It could be, you know, half acre or greater, or it could be smaller than that. So with half acre lots, other than so we talked about open space and preserving half an acre. I know we talked about the cookie cutter, that's something that's come up quite a bit about allowing a cookie cutter look. So we started to tackle that and dive into that a little bit of, okay, how do we address that? So we talked about the different architectural features or standards. We almost have a menu that you can pick on. It was also discussed, there's codes out there where you have different block face has to look different. So again, trying to break up that repetitive, and you just can't tell your house from your neighbor. This is interesting, and I don't know if we can come back to Paul Bruce and talk about, in a way, this is still clustering, but doing your townhomes in the center, your townhomes now allow you larger lots and greater open space as well. So still get developers at unit count that they're looking for. So that was one thing that came up. And it would give you a better aesthetic than the 40-foot lots, where it's just a driveway and a door. You could have the driveways in the back and break up what that looks like. We mentioned animal corridors and open space. So then we fully got an agreement on the open space and you guys jump in here too. 40%, that's how it's high. There's concerns about getting into property values. And that's something that Chris would probably hit on even more. I felt like we were talking about TDRs and getting there to transfer development rights and whether or not that could be, particularly in the bottom area, you could have a second and then a receiving area, whether it's in Llama or I don't think we fully got there, is it somewhere else in the rural area, but I think we agree on that. We're trying to transfer to urban areas. Hold on, potentially, that was still up in the air, not totally agreed on. What else? This is something you all hit on. I feel like I heard tonight there was consensus on the dark sky community. So that was something I feel like we gained some traction on tonight. So I learned that pretty quick, guys. That's my bad memory. Anything to add? Buddy?
Well, to build on one of Reed's last comments about some accommodations for the buffers versus the large lots. I felt like we had a lot of that similar conversation, and that was something I felt like was not new, but it was crystallized tonight for me personally a little better than I had heard it before. That I asked the question at one point: would you rather have very small lots in the center of a piece of property that you can't see at all from the roadway, or would you rather have a mix of lots with large lots that you might be able to see those houses though along the road? And I think I don't know if I would call it a consensus, but the preference seemed to be the latter. So you would have large lots, but the trade-off might be that visually the neighbors and the road from roadways, you might see those lots or those homes.
So in other words, not getting into screening, you have a bigger line that serves as your buffer.
Right.
And into that, the whole thought that out here, we don't believe you should see a house. So to make sure we got that part straight out of it, it isn't whether or not we see a house. It's whether or not we see 50 of them 5 feet apart, lining the street that we live on. So it's not just about, I don't want anybody to think this is about completely hiding them, and we don't know if there's a neighborhood there. All right, so it concurs with that, yes, we vary them in the large, they're a lot more larger. Billy, we'd be far more appreciative of the fact of, okay, let's just say this, and just stuff them all in the middle. Two things I would like to mention: TDRs. I find that to be such an interesting thing in our own county here, that you decide that, okay, you know what? The people over there in Ball that live on Lake Carlton, they should have their open spaces. So let's just stuff them all in Waimama and convenience that more, so the people out here have open space. This lot right here, they tried to transfer them from Rodine. Me living here and you making more open space on Rodine Road doesn't do anything for me to complicate my life that much more than you have this. So I don't see that TDR in any way, shape, or form being a word. Well, then you need to write it that way, that they're running out of the rural, they're only going to the urban. People that want to live there, they can.
That's really the key here. What's the current code? Current code says you're allowed to do it.
It's in, it's within our.
You can request it. You can request it. The current code also says, though, that compatibility and adjacent are two definitions that the properties have to be touching.
I thought,
And they're.
I've been working on
This one over here.
a lot of TDRs, the pilot projects with the county. The county doesn't really have a TDR program, it's in the code, but they don't really do it. I've been trying to figure this out. Not say it's work, not work. But I thought, I do think there are property owners within our legally owned, that said that, hey, I'll send my density over to a site where it makes more sense, closer to the infrastructure, closer to the water, closer to sewer, closer to schools. And that gives Baum, because when I look at Baum and when you come down through here, you know, you got a lot of 5 acre tracts in Carlton Lake Road. You got Sweatwood, Burnett, all that. You know, those are areas, it's like, hey, where's the next development gonna come? Well, it's likely gonna come, you know, up on 672, right across the street from where it's at now, you know, near the high school. And it was to be a way to kind of get your larger tract, potentially never develop land on the east side of Baum by allowing it to sit to the west side of Baum. As a kind of a way to make a trade-off, and then you get some more, that's where you get your open ag land protected potentially. Because there's not going to be any ag land with any of these developments. I mean, they may put a 1 acre community farm, but there's not going to be 60, 70 acres.
No, yeah,
Tomatoes, you know.
and we're aware of that, but it's still, and I appreciate every piece of that you have here. And what I'm giving you a true example is because what you say is not happening here is already approved at 354 on that 178 Strong Street. So it's not happening down there, it's happening right there. And the transfer request was from the property on the road, leading around to here. No, I know all about it, I can tell you the number of it, but the point is saying, where the TDR as a rule to me doesn't work unless we get better at it. Because it was originally that this is her property, this is my property, we sold it as a collective, we will move from here to create more open space in this property right here, and that was an agreement in the plan of it originally being written. And now it's being swapped from me to you, which means
But it
I gain it here and you don't over there.
It was requested that way, but it's not approved that way. There's no transfer between those two properties.
It's because it didn't happen, it was 54 units, and we bought it, and they pulled it out of it. Because we bought it, because if we didn't fight it, there'd be 54 more here, and 54 less 6 miles away. So tell me what that serves, other than function, is what we do. So people live in Rhode Island.
I think those are probably different planning areas, and you're talking about the RP-2 within Baum, and that's why you're kind of looking at your area. You know, they're not. I didn't know that had attempted, but definitely wouldn't happen now. Sorry, good luck, Cam.
It wasn't, I didn't do it.
But I don't think we talked about TDRs into this area.
But-
I haven't heard them talk about that.
And I'm talking about this bomb, I'm talking about that as a program to do.
Or if you have.
Because it's so bastardized that, you know, so now it's just about putting more houses on. So, you know, yeah, we're gonna move them, we're gonna clear up these 20 acres, but we're not gonna put 600 acre over there.
I think.
You know,
I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't understand, other than that being next door, look, I get it. But I don't understand, if you're taking two properties that are going to be developed, and you take units from one and put it all on the other, so your impacts are on one property, and there's not an impact to the second property, explain to me how that's not a better scenario.
How is it a better scenario?
How is it?
I live where they're coming, not where they came from.
So it's where you live, that's, I mean, that-
You're asking where I don't think it works, I don't think it works.
We had a very specific scenario that was a lot different than I think what we're talking about, of taking them from the Riverview RP-2 and sending them down to Baum. You know, and so you have a very idea of it, and my idea was just to send it closer to the infrastructure and leave them more open space on each side.
Well, then we can note on there on written rules on how it's done, because as it is right now, it's just, again,
And we had a conversation.
both sides aren't concerned.
We're having for two, getting into this, okay, how do you keep the land the way it is and allow the land there, you have the value, property value conversation, how do you allow that to continue? Yeah, we're talking about that too.
I thought we were talking about how worthwhile TDRs are.
Well,
Oh, no, there's no policy. There is.
I was gonna say, I think we have consensus. I don't think we think the policies today are well written either,
They're
so
not.
we're clear, so
They're
there's no
not.
disagreement there that if there is going to be.
Well, those are two
TDR
suggestions though, and the other one is going to be townhouses. So, you know, so in 8 or 10 years, we're going to be splitting apartments. And if you doubt that, I'll take you to 20 townhouse areas, what city you want to go to.
No, I think that with the TDR conversation, if it's only an urban area, you're probably never gonna get any conservation land ever, because the urban area has more density than it use. And so your opportunity to have more open space or keep certain farms or keep certain open land that connects to corridors is, you gotta try to figure it out within a smaller area. Because when you make it countywide, you get lost. I mean, it's like USF doesn't do their density down here. You know, they're like, oh, you know, we're 20 acre, good luck, you know? And they're too, this is not impactful enough to make the property owner say, hey, yeah, you know what, I can keep mine, you know, I got 100 acres, I'm gonna do 20 acre tracts, I'm gonna send all the rest of the density over to someone who's got a, you know, 300-400 acre project that can develop it over there, and I'll serve, mine will be restricted forever for, you know, big lot larger lots or one lot, you have to be obviously negotiated.
We got about 20 or 30 minutes, and I think we're right where we're probably bring on something, other things. But I kind of want to go through this list real fast, and just bring it down.
Did you have one that you wanted to add to that?
What I said, TDR. I've been down there for 2 different counties. Sold the first TDRs in Collier County. And then they had to revise the whole plan. And the bottom line is they need to be set up in such a way that they are restricted between geographical areas. And the idea of Riverview selling stuff and sending it down the farm, that should be. And I'm not trying to call on Riverview, but I'm just saying, it's very difficult for TDR. And I know Collier's gone through it, Lee County tried it, I don't know whether they kept it. But it's a very complicated thing, and it needs to be restricted, very.
On a smaller area, but you can kind of make sense of it on a big area.
Yeah, it should be back to the original idea, which was, you know, make a deal with your neighbor. But it's blown away. I mean, the first ones I sold was in Collier County, and I wasn't going to use my density, so I sold it to Marco Island people so they could build more high rises. Well, good Lord, they went crazy. Find out how many units I sold.
Man, you have a lot of.
And the county came back and cut it out. So it's a very complicated business to get into TDRs. If I can make one other comment about commercial. I'm primarily a commercial developer now. I was home building and developing land for many years, but the last 20 years, I concentrate on commercial. And the idea, and I didn't realize that Hillsborough has this, where they say that you have to put commercial in every place. That's crazy. It's nuts. And you won't get commercial developers that have any brains in their head that are going to take it. It's going to end up in crappy little places. The answer, I think Bond's a great place. Now, I go back to the overview of Sun City Center. Sun City Center was one big master plan, 12,000 acres. And over the years, it's had some changes. Of course, the county's raised hell about the fact that it was too loose. We could do a lot of things that because zoning laws changed. But we had specific areas for commercial, and it's turned out to be a way to serve the community. And if you go north of 674, you have the commercial right there, but all the rest of it is residential. And there was one high rise that came in the Sun City in the early days, and then we cut that out. But I think you need to have a commercial area, like a downtown area designated. Otherwise, you're going to end up with little junky 7-Eleven stores all over the place.
Yeah, and that's the direction you're headed, identifying railroad standings, other locations involved.
What would be involved in this? I'm not, if you took the RP-2 area that hasn't already been committed and do a master plan for the whole area, and that designate town center, designate other areas that could be developed. And then anyone that wants to sell TDRs out of their 1 to 5 acre parcels, you can put them in there.
Thank you.
Yeah. They, I don't, in my head, I see what you're saying. That's one of the goal of BOM is the village, not every development is its own village. What it would take to do that, I don't know. I've never part of the process like that. Maybe y'all know.
Well, one thing I thought was interesting that Jay said last time, one thing I did hear when I was on Zoom, was that we didn't include in this RP2 study, looking at the BOM community plan. And I think that if we need to do that to implement the things we're talking about here, then we should be doing that, right? I mean, if we want to say we all agree on this, and that requires, because there is sort of a master plan, right, in the BOM community plan. And so if we were to make adjustments to that, we would need, as part of this exercise, we would need to do this, right?
Right. I made a copy of that the adopted copy. Yeah, and that would be part of the recommendations, Kenny, so you're exactly right, that if you guys move the RP2 needle in such a direction that it actually changed the BOM community plan, that then would be one of the recommendations coming out of this, to then enact a publicly initiated amendment to change that BOM community plan. But again, the board did not tell us to change that plan, but you're right, we always need to, cross our T's and check it, make sure we're doing the right.
From the very onset of these discussions, we've talked about the fact that we need to revise the BOM community plan. The plan was put together 10 or 15 years ago. It represented community consent or concept back then, and I think things have changed so significantly over that period of time that we've talked about that, so it needs to be part of the process, it needs to be revised. But you're right, that should be, it's like putting the cart, before the horse. We should really do that, and that was why, as a community, we kind of went back and put together a concept of what we were after out of this RP2 review, that concept paper. It's very vague, it's broad, but it kind of gives an overview of what we think we want to see.
Well, I mean,
as
from,
development
I guess
occurs.
my concern is from an efficiency standpoint, right? I mean, we're all here spending our time going through this process. I mean, this is your community plan, so I'm not trying to influence it for you, but just from my perspective, if we're gonna try to do what we're doing, then we shouldn't take all this time to do this and then have to wait another 9 months to do an update to the community plan that have all of us coming out to the same type of meetings and involve, if there's different stakeholders that are involved that aren't necessarily engaged in this. I mean, I just have concerns about.
We're in agreement with you. Yeah, please note, we're in agreement with you. And as a gross example, what we're trying to fight, go, and go down to 75, and I can't give you the exact mile marker, but there's a subdivision on the right, beautiful large subdivision, and every roof is the same color. Every roof in the development is. I realize from a developer's point of view, I can buy white shingles and I can buy for every house, I'm getting 10% off, blah, blah, blah. We're not ignorant of any of that, but that's what our area has turned into. And you can't sit here and deny that. And we are trying to revise that, not stop it where we. Yeah. Is that a fair evaluation of what's going on?
Yeah, I think to your point, Bill, you look at, look at the plan, that wasn't part of what we were doing. I know I approved it, but we did look at the points, that's what they did.
Plan was a starting point, but again, if we were to go out right now and spend the time, I'm not sure, I went through the first round of that plan, I'm not sure I have the patience now to do that. With the county, because progress is so slow, I can't stand it. But we went out, if we were to do that again right now, I think the legitimacy of the plan would be in question, because we can make comments, statements, demands, whatever, concepts, perception of what we want to see, and it's not relevant because the county isn't going to allow us to do that, or developers are going to move in and do whatever they want to do anyway. So it's got to be worked together. We need a concept at a high level, which I think the community we tried to do in that little concept. I mean, it's simple, but it's kind of what we had in mind.
Yeah.
And then we tie that back into the development and the changes in the county standards and the comprehensive plan, you know, and work through to get what's a real compromise.
All right. If you remember when this started, Jared, you know, and where I guess a little bit of our frustration comes from is we were originally, and we really do understand your concerns as a farmer. We're not ignorant of that, and you know, we're not trying to hurt that. You need to know that we're not ignorant of it. Billy Farms. The fact is this was brought out to us as this RP-2. And the moratorium went in place and everybody was going to go, hallelujah, we're actually going to go. And then within a week, it got cut down the bomb in a small spot.
Yeah.
So the rest of the RP-2 is still, you know, and we truly did believe that it was a bigger and larger problem that is accumulating to the problem as a whole. So that's where a little bit of the frustration is all we're trying to do is massage the bomb. I mean, you know, and that's all we have now, so that's what we work. But we're really only trying to solve the problem. You know, you don't have to ask me about townhouse or apartment. I'll take you to the end of 672 and we'll look across the street. You know, I mean, so it's all happening around us and it's causing the problems that all of us up in here are having. And then to turn around and go, okay, so let's just turn this into an urban area as well. It's hard for us to just give up. So it's got to be somewhat of a compromise. There has to be somewhat of a compromise.
Let's go through that. Let's go through it. So we got, again, kind of this summary and guys, I want to say that you put the points out too, because we did, as you mentioned in general, so we got them in there. We took a page and a half and basically summarized them by type. So tonight I think we've had some good conversations. So we start with lot types, development, lot size, and incentives. And I feel like I heard a little bit more on the mixture. We can't agree probably on what that looks like. Some would say half acres, some would say fill us do some smaller lots in the middle, and let's get to our unit count, and maybe on the periphery, although I think someone said that is the market for that too. So let's talk about that. If we can agree that right now there's nothing in this code that'll tell you you have to do a mixture of lot types, but I feel like we got there where we can't put that in there now.
Define mixture of lot type again.
So that could be, you specify, is it quarter acre, half acre, whatever that. It's not.
Billy, you got these? You have
I don't
that?
have that one.
You get that.
That's all right. I'll.
We didn't get into it a lot.
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
I mean, something I know, the project I worked on, we typically do this anyway. I don't know if you're ever gonna get agreement on sizes on the perimeter, but can you agree in there, and y'all have to tell me, can you agree if, just to say that the perimeter lots will be larger than the interior lots, or percentage of the exterior lots?
Yeah, from my perspective, is that, we pay an awful lot for land, again, right? And then home builders, they know the demographics and they know what the salaries are in the Tampa Bay markets. So this is a business, they have to get price points. They're in the business of selling homes, right? So it can't just can't go to a larger lot size just because we think it's a good idea in this room. This, at the end of the day, is a home building business, right? So lot sizes is coming out of the marketplace. I'd prefer, if it was up to me, to look at the open space. And where do you put the open space? And where do you put your landscaping and screening? If the issue is we want to have 40% open space, then let's go with that. Then the lot sizes sort of take care of itself. Could be a mixture of 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. If you get much larger than that, it becomes an issue of being able to sell a lot that's large or a large home into a very small market segment, right? So from my perspective, these larger lots, half acre, acre lot, not likely to be generally acceptable to the home building market in the community. Now, if I had to live with a few on a perimeter, maybe, but I'd rather address that with open space and landscaping.
So you almost sound like you.
Acceptable to the home building market relative to the developer or to the home?
To the home buyer.
So you think the home buyer is not interested in a larger lot?
There are some people that do want larger lots, but.
So that's
Very small.
That's the fundamental concept that I think we have is we'd like to attract that type of development versus the people that want to live on top of each.
Need smaller acreage.
Or
I said it one time, it wasn't, it was just one off, but it's a completely different person. You have to, when you get up to a 160 acre threshold, those guys are. If you allow, there's actually a lot of AFC1 zoning around here.
Yeah.
Grandfathered in, but to get that kind of lot, you have to open that up for some smaller acreage, because those guys will do it. And they would you would get the 1s and the halves and things like that, but they're not allowed to do, so now they're gonna go sell to the big guy.
But from my
Because that's their
perspective,
only option.
from my perspective, I guess I'm not hung up on 160 acres being
Yeah.
the size of a plant development. I had 20 something acres, you know,
Yeah.
I would love to have, been
Yeah.
able to make half, 1 acre or whatever, but, I mean, I'm not hung up I'm personally not hung up on the
Rita,
size of
yeah.
the land for the development.
I mean, he's onto something there. There's an acreage threshold which gets reduced considerably.
But then the lots.
Yeah, then the lots are bigger. Because
Well,
there are a lot
that's
of.
a concept, that's simple, we don't want development everywhere. but
Yeah,
we're
there's a
just
lot of
saying-
custom home builders out there that are looking for a half acre, an acre lots. Very small development, very small. When it gets to be 160 acres and larger, you're talking about the natural.
We have presented to this county and to these folks, I don't know how many times, some of the developments that reside currently in this area. The Amber Suite right here,
Yep.
One of the examples that is, we believe, acceptable to development standards coming forward is probably the new development over there off of Dewberry Road is, I think, 1 acre lot. It's, they're nice, it kind of meshes with the rural environment that we're trying to sustain.
I'll give you a real world example, not here, and some of y'all may know her, some of you may not. Dorothy Meadows has 20 acres right up here. It's zoning ASC1 on the north side of her, zoned ASC1 on the south side of her. She's RP2 AR, she cannot do anything.
1 to 5.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody around here can build 1 acre tracts, but she can't do anything. So when I say that, I do say it with sincerity, because she called me to do something last second. She just wanted, she needed to do something with it. But it's properties like those that you can say, hey, that's where you get your road, your Amber Suite. You start to get, and that will help both community out.
And I think what we get, the community, what we get out of that is a long-term impact of larger lots, less houses, less density, and sustaining or maintaining let's face it, if you got a half acre or an acre lot, you're not gonna do much agriculture or anything on it, but they're not on top of each other. It's not allowing the nightmare that this county has allowed to occur. Everywhere in this county, from this area all the way north and all the way west of here.
I think that's where it starts to get into that compromise, because if you do a half acre to an acre a lot throughout this whole area, you're looking at septic probably, you're not looking at transportation improvements, development fund. So that's kind of the trade-off.
You still paying up road fees at the highest rate. You still, I think, limiting factor, I think water and sewer would be wired that. It's not really a service area. So.
Just to develop that stuff, I corner, I'm looking at contracts, because 89 acres with a bunch of wetlands, and he's only putting in 50-acre lots, and it's all unseptic. And then there's another one not far from there last year, and I think there's two of, where's that one? Off of Lithia Pinecrest, and it's outside the urban service area. But they're 1-acre lots, so, I mean, there is a market for it. I know it might be a small market, but there again, if you
I
don't
think it's
offer
premium.
this to people, how can they, buy it? I mean, I get people all the time asking me where I live, 10 acres. Oh, man, I wasn't buying 10 acres. You see anything down there? Or even 5 acres, 2 acres and stuff like that. I mean, there are a lot of people out there looking for something bigger than.
Steve, I see you nodding too.
But yeah, we're talking about these 5-acre tracts, 10-acre tracts, 20-acre tracts. And we get calls from those kind of people all the time, right? I can't buy, I can't do a planned development, can't do an RP-2 village. But if the regulations in RP-2 were such that there's not even an acre threshold, that will get you the mix of larger and half-acre lots peppered into the community. It gives that more of a sort of a rural residential feel to it.
Yeah.
And here's our concern with that, Steve. Is when getting rid of the threshold, and I don't mean to be rude, but what we've experienced with the development community, as far as what we are seeing around here, that would just be like giving them a cherry on top of the cake, and they would not take any of the consideration, and because that's what we're seeing, just like moving the transferring from 6 miles away, they would take that apart, and then now we have 10-acre lots that now fall under RP-2, et cetera, and they jump on that like white on rice.
Yeah.
And that's a major concern.
I agree 100%. I was thinking that.
And
we're speaking.
So if it's gonna be in there, there's gotta be language in there that designates that, and there's way too much in there now that's not that way, which is why we have these widespread things like moving TDRs to farm. Because it's so vaguely written.
What are some thoughts or?
And as a clarifier, let me clarify this, because I'm not speaking entirely for the community, but I think I'm speaking mostly for people in the community. 160 acres may be too large, 10 acres may be too small, so let's be careful in the concept. Let's not say, you can go in and have 10 acres and break it into half-acre lots, and now you got 20 houses on 10 acres, and you got roads and all that. That is not what I think I'm advocating or saying or communicating. But I'm thinking there's a middle ground somewhere where we reduce the size of the lot, and let's say, and this is what if, for instance, if there's 40 acres, maybe you have 1 acre, half-acre lots on 40 acres, or 1-acre lots on 40 acres, or 10 acres, there's gotta be, there's a measure, a gauge that you use.
You mentioned the scale before, and for us to even want to consider agreeing with that would have to be built in, and only because we've seen what happens with everything that's been widened.
That kind of thing is too small for us, so that would appeal to a custom home builder.
And to your point on development, so living out here, and again, you may not be able to spread that everywhere, but the fact of the matter is, if we went and the compromise ended up being larger acres around, larger homes around the perimeter and smaller on the inside, there isn't a person out here that's got between 1 and 5 acres that can't sell it in a heartbeat. Any given day, right on, I can't remember, Janice, street, Dupree? No, where is it? Dupree, guy decided he was gonna put 7 houses there, there wasn't a shovel moved in all 7 acres or so. Okay, so for to tell me that we're gonna come out here and we're gonna put 50 half-acre lots around the outside as you are drawing them here, let's compromise and let's move them on the inside. Every one of those half-acre lots out here will sell just as easily as the 40-foot lots that are in the middle, and I'm wholeheartedly of the belief.
Steve, you're thinking one development, so you're shaking your head.
No, I couldn't make that.
I think that's really tough is the RP-2, the 160 big developments are really part of the plan. And the smaller ones are easier, you can see and say, oh, I can see that. And, yeah, so, I mean, it's two different builders, two different developers.
You're looking, like in this instance you gave us here, you're looking at 511 houses either way. And I'm of the belief that the ones on the perimeter would sell just the same as it's on.
Because it's all that we.
And I can,
Good for dark.
But yeah, right, so, and I appreciate your studies and your demographic, and no different than those tropical acres, and it show you, I know we're on the creek, show you how many people have no trouble selling money. So it's just a matter of where you want to get this from. Again, we're very much on the fact that having discussions on what's best for breeding doesn't work.
So we've only got a couple minutes until 7 o'clock, and I like where the conversation was going. One thing about 1 acre and half acre lots on the smaller size is that's a lot of cuts coming off of your main roads. You move 160 acre development, that 160 acre development might have to put traffic light in. 10 half acre lots, 15 half acre lots, no traffic lights. So there's some things there, you might have to say that then those 10 and 15 acre home, those smaller ones, they may still have to aggregate into a larger subdivision to allow that to actually have some movement through. But I think it's a really good conversation you guys are having. I think the thing that we came to realize through all of this is that the clustering at times discourages any other type of development except for small compact development in the middle of the field. And it seems like that's something that we can all agree upon, that there needs to be some different type of development coming out of this than just that one style of development, one product. Steve, the product you do is a very good product for what the people want, but there are obviously other consumers out here as well. So I think that can be that give and take of trying to be able to find that middle ground. I just want to thank all of you for coming out, and Jared or Clarence, you guys want to talk about some next steps before we break for tonight?
Yeah, thanks again. I noticed a lot of your all the time, so I appreciate it. The next one we have is May 22nd. Jay, I think it's going to be here, right?
It is May 22nd, it's going to be here in the morning, it is a general session, so we won't be doing a small group like this.
What time?
It's in the morning, I want to say it's at 9:30 or 10. Mary Ann, if you can hear me, you might be able to reply to that.
Hi, yes, I can hear you. Yes, so on the 22nd, there are 2 sessions. We're doing the sessions again. And there's one at 9:30 and then one at 11.
9:30, is that what she said?
Yes, it begins at 9:30 in the morning, there's a session at 9:30, and then there's a session at 11 a.m. So, Jared, Clarence, and the crew will be giving you a presentation, do some sort of activity, get some feedback, maybe we'll be inside, maybe we'll be outside, just like we did the first time. And then, we'll do it all again at 11 a.m.
Is this useful for you?
You do realize that the area in which we were talking about, when we transfer development to an area that was more suited for that, at one period of time was a field just like Tom.
you know.
It was a field just like Tom.
I
And it was turned into an urban area.
I apologize, I was late. The 2 of you, I guess, you're representing the developers.
I'm Tammy Corbett, I was with Hill Ward Henderson, I'm a land use lawyer, and then this is Steve Woods from Eisenhower Property.
Steve, yeah. Can I say something real quick? Yeah, sure. Those of you who know Jacob Franklin, you know that you're talking to his wife passed away yesterday. Oh, my God. Unbelievable. All right, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.